We're all dealing with this stuff. I want to frame this as, 2017 was, I think for us and in our lifetime, it was, I would not call it our first love, but it was our first extreme major disaster. Growing up in Sonoma County, and like many of you been here for most of my life, we've had floods, we've had windstorms, we've had other events, but this was a game changer. And in the days following, we talked about how to say never again. And I think the never again for me, and for the way that I saw it and that our community saw it, was really this idea of being caught flat-footed. Is no matter what, you can be in a sense of moving what we called Sonoma strong over to Sonoma ready. And so, I think back, and I first want to thank all of the I say public input, but I'm really talking about salient, amazing comments from people who have been impacted in so many ways, directly and indirectly, which, as we learned, was directly from this. So, first we have the R&R, the Recovery and Resiliency Framework. We had sessions in all of our districts. We had 275 actions identified, translation, a litany of work, and obviously, as any document has to be living and has to be considered imperfect. We worked on changing those cacophony-based town halls into block captain networks. And then at the same time, I just have to acknowledge that reading through these emails and surveys on requests for us for consideration, it really brought me back to those moments, because they're stories about loss and stories about continued angst, about continued fear of the fires that we continue to face. There's stories in here about not getting an alert and warning and having lost everything and not getting a moment. It's very real and salient. And I know we're all kind of thinking about that as we go into it. So I think, for me, my goal going into this is going to be to focus on, number one, is the resilience of our community. Why? Because when we said never again, I think we looked forward 2 years in all of our preparedness. And the Kincaid fire versus the Sonoma complex in 2017 was a night and day situation. I called it a tale of two fires, because while we had this crazy firestorm, just like we had this year again, we were able to evacuate people. We were able to let people do their jobs. We were able to communicate. And all of those things need to be improved. But that Sonoma ready really defined our experiences. So I want to say kudos to our staff and to my colleagues for really embodying that. But obviously the grunt work, or what I would call the trench work, trench warfare of resilience, is really in vegetation management. It's in community preparedness. It's in home hardening. It's in all of these deeper level things that go far beyond alert and warning systems, far beyond the number of firefighters who can respond, far beyond how well we forecast and how we do evacuation. So, I think I just say that as a sense of that's really where I'm going to be focusing my comments, my questions. And I like the idea that we're talking about figuring out buckets and then asking staff to come back with proposals. So the first thing is that the $26.8 million that was put into our budget recently, I actually feel that was very cheap compared to what was justified in the negotiations. We pulled 26.8 million back, but if you look at the calculations for our negotiating with PG&E, the lack of the lost county staff, the lost ability of our general fund, all of these other things that we did, I would call those basically claims that were denied by FEMA to backfill us, right? And in that sense, it could have been 15 to 20 million more dollars. So I like that we settled on a number that allowed us to basically keep our organization going, so that, for instance, post-budget, we're able to respond to the glass fire. We're able to respond to everything that's out there. We're able to provide the social safety net during COVID. I really think that is paramount stuff. On the other side, I feel that the second thing is, and I appreciate you diving in already, which was the damages, really infrastructure, roads and ancillary infrastructure. You know, that's not to go and pave everything under the sun, because if we were to just put all of the money into roads and put $100 million into roads, we wouldn't be investing in resilience in the future. And as we get into this resilience item, I'm going to be really looking for and asking questions specifically of Crystal and others about the recovery and resiliency framework, because it identified community preparedness and infrastructure as a top goal. Housing, the economy, safety net services, and natural resources were the 5 areas that we developed that with. And with a heavy focus on not just what are the things we need to improve, but how and with who do we improve them. So how do we embed equity and works programs and youth jobs into vegetation management? You know, one thought would be Youth Ecology Corps, California Conservation Corps, other things like that. How do we embed basically the kind of investments that we put down over the course of now and over the next 4 to 5 months into leveraged dollars from the state and feds and our nonprofits? How do we embolden our nonprofits to be more prepared and to take care of our vulnerable citizens? So as we get further into this discussion and when we come back with staff, I think one thing, as Crystal said, is that, you know, Crystal Carey Harrow said, is for staff to come back with proposals. But I want to make sure that we have a structure and a mechanism set up with staff that says, hey, every single proposal that comes forward out of this has to have leveraged dollars evaluated for it. Every single one has to have community partners evaluated. Every single one has to have the equity lens of how do we put people to work and how do we protect vulnerable people. Everyone has to have a focus of true preparedness and an ethos that leads us forward, because we just continue to deal with more and more of this stuff. So I'm going to back off for a moment, and because I feel like I could dive into a lot of these, but I want to let you and some of my colleagues kind of you know, hear from what are the level discussions about what we want to do. And I think that's I like the way that this is being proposed, that, you know, here's the damages, here's what we already put back into the mechanism. So what's the future fund? And out of the future fund, for me, is the big goal is going to be the big audacious shock and awe goal is going to be, how do we start pre-defeating these fires instead of chasing them? Really grunt work, not just high level technology and organization. So thank you, Chair Gorin, and I'll pass it back to you.
Well, good afternoon, Chair Gordon, members of the board, County Council Pittman, and County Administrator Bratton. Crystal Carey Harrow, Interim Deputy County Administrator, presenting you this afternoon information related to the PG&E settlement of funds received by the county associated with the 2017 Sonoma complex fires. The recommended action for this item is to receive report on community feedback related to the PG&E settlement funds, and consider allocation of the settlement funds into general expenditure categories. Here's just a brief agenda of what I'll be presenting. I'll share some background information, describe the PG&E settlement funds already allocated by your board, summarize the input that we received from the community on their priorities for PG&E settlement fund allocation, and quickly review county strategic priorities before you deliberate on high-level expenditure plans for the settlement funds. So just a quick review of how we got to this discussion. The Sonoma County entities initiated litigation against PG&E for damages related to the 2017 fires, as evidence emerged that PG&E's equipment and infrastructure caused the fires. The damage assessment resulted in estimated losses to all entities was $244.3 million. The settlement amount approved in June is $149.3 million. And I've included here the table, which you've seen before, showing the category of losses. The largest of these represent damages to county assets and future loss, revenue, and staff time. Your board had a preliminary discussion about PG&E settlement fund allocation on August 11th and received some general information for consideration. Strategic initiatives, impacts to county infrastructure from recent disasters, and community input. I'll share the community input in a few slides, but first want to acknowledge your board's decision to allocate some of the PG&E funds since the August 11th discussion. During the budget hearings in September, your board allocated $26.8 million of the PG&E settlement funds. This is the same amount of the out-of-pocket expenses in the litigation category of losses, the out-of-pocket costs the county incurred as a result of the fires. Some of these funds will be used for fire prevention and emergency response, $2.5 million, $9.9 million for 3 years of critical staffing needs, $1.2 million for accessing coordinated care and empowering self-sufficiency access support, and $8.5 million to restore reserve funds used for the wildfires. This is a chart you saw during the budget hearings to support staff's recommendation to use PG&E one-time funds to restore reserves. I'm showing here again for the benefit of the public that restoring reserves was needed to ensure that county meets its financial policy target to maintain a reserve level above the 1 month minimum, or 8.3% of annual general fund revenues. As you can see in the small table here, 1.1 million was improved in June of 2020, which brought that reserve level up to 8.5%. The additional 8.5 million from PG&E funds brings the level to 10%, which should maintain the minimum level over the next few years, given current projections. Okay. As part of the preliminary discussion on the 11th of August, your board directed staff to receive input from the community on settlement allocation for consideration as potential general expenditure categories. We received input through emails to the email address here, a survey, and letters to the board chair and the county administrator. The PG&E community input email was set up starting on August 11th, and emails were collected through September 14th. The email address was shared in the press release related to that board item and through social media outlets. And we also sent emails to community organizations directly to invite their input. 355 emails were received from individuals and individuals representing over 50 community groups. The top 5 categories and responses were road repair, vegetation management, public safety, housing and rental assistance programs, alert and warning systems, and community preparedness. In addition to the email address, staff issued a survey in both English and Spanish to solicit feedback. The survey period was from September 2nd to the 14th. A link to the survey was posted on county social media sites and also sent directly to 85 contacts within Latinx community-based organizations. It was also sent to 2017 fire survivors and block captain groups. You'll see here, note that 60% of the respondents from the English survey lost their homes, and 21% of the response for the Spanish did as well. So the survey questions and results are included as an attachment to the board item summary. There were just 5 questions, but the primary question was the one here. Which of the 3 areas listed should the county prioritize as it decides how to allocate PG&E funds? In the table, we're sharing the top 5 ranked areas from the responses separately for the English and the Spanish versions. You can see that the majority of responses, not surprisingly, were from the English version, 1,618 respondents, compared to 29 respondents to the Spanish survey. Despite this disparity in the number of responses, we note that 3 are the same in the top 5 for both groups: alert and warning systems, affordable housing, and community preparedness. These also mostly align with the input received through the email address for feedback. And here, the full survey questions and responses are also included as an attachment. Respondents also had an opportunity to provide free-form responses that were consistent with what's captured in the table. Also expressions of support for farm workers and addressing homelessness. And in the Spanish version, respondents indicating support for undocumented workers, schools, and financial assistance. So the next few slides are a review of high-level and strategic county priorities. Here, I'm revisiting the impact to county roads from the 2017 wildfires. So we've heard 32 county roads were damaged. We had significant damage as a result of removing burned trees on both private property and the public right-of-way. And the Transportation and Public Works Department report $4 million in non-reimbursable expenses that included the cost to replace culverts, guardrails, streetlights, and retaining walls. This next slide is a bit of a snapshot of the last couple of years and how recent disasters have taken a toll on our county roads. In the 2019 winter floods and storm events, 85 sites saw damage estimated at $55 million. The Kincaid fire was approximately 43 miles of damaged roads with estimated damages of $4 million. In the very recent Walbridge and Myers fires, approximately 5 miles with damage estimates between 3 and 4 million. And in the current event, the Glass fires, our TPW director has estimated 25 miles of damaged roads with damage estimates approximately $6 million. Okay, the Recovery and Resiliency Framework that your board approved in 2018 in response to the 2017 fires is another strategic investment. Staff and the community identified 275 proposed actions, and the Office of Recovery and Resiliency has been reporting on progress throughout framework implementation. As you know, many frameworks activities are still unfunded, though some are supported by grant funding and matching funds that your board set aside to support matching funds for FEMA, hazard mitigation grant programs, and now with other CAL FIRE grant programs, as well as current applications that are pending for building resilient infrastructure in communities. Here again are the top 10 priorities projects that your board approved with the framework. And by now, these are very familiar to all, but it is certainly worth noting that some of these priorities directly align with what we learned through the community input process, and also with what we heard from our own department heads: alert and warning systems, evacuation routes, undergrounding, vegetation management, of course, and community disaster preparedness. Okay, high-level status for these projects. If we were to be using those stoplight indicators that we've seen in the past, these would be all green with the exception of the one-stop shop. That's no different than what we presented for our annual report for the framework in January, which is not to say that no progress has been made, but we will be working on a second annual report in the next couple of months. Finally, just a reminder that at your direction, staff have been continuing their work to develop a county 5-year strategic plan, which has goals and objectives within these 5 strategic pillars: healthy and safe communities, racial equity and social justice, organizational excellence, climate action and resiliency, and resilient infrastructure. So following your discussion today to develop broad expenditure categories for allocation, staff recommends that your board direct county departments and agencies to develop plans and timelines to program funds in alignment with your board's expenditure categories. These department and agency plans would be brought back to the board in early 2021 for your consideration and direction.